Glenna Mageau and I were having a little informal chat just to catch up, because I haven't chatted with Glenna in ages. And in the last 6 months, Glenna has published 2 books, and the conversation got rolling in such a way that I thought, why aren't I recording this? Because I think everybody's going to want to hear this. So, Glenna, so first of all, Glenna, you are typically in the past, you've been a fiction author, right?
Yes.
And now you've just published 2 nonfiction books.
Yes, yes.
How exciting. I love books.
Jump ship. No.
What did you say? Jump ship?
Jump ship.
So start to tell me about the book that you were just holding up, the one that just came out that you've been telling me about. Do you know your mother's story?
Yeah, it came about because of a couple of reasons. One, because I have a lot of my mom's story, but it's scattered all over the place, and she's no longer here to ask. So I've always thought I need to pull that information together. And I've often thought about my kids too. There's lots of stuff I haven't shared with them. We just don't see it as all that important. If we're doing something, it's like, oh, I used to do that, or, oh, I remember. But we don't really share much. We just, now and then we share bits and pieces. So I just thought it was extremely important. But another thing that really inspired it is I've been interviewing women, they'd be in their 80s, 90s, 100s, who back in their day stepped outside the norm, and they worked or got educated, right? And a lot of the stuff they're telling me, their families didn't know. Right. And I just thought, oh my God, this can't be lost. I think every woman should be writing down her journey, because everyone has a story, and it's unique, and I find it so fascinating and just inspiring. And kids, we need to pass it on to our kids. They need to know our stories. They need to know family history. It's just, yeah. And it's sad how many times I've heard that stuff is lost.
Right, right. So in doing those interviews with those 20 or 30 women, what your original intent was, what with those stories that's morphed into this book?
Well, my original intent actually was I was taking the stories and I was creating a book, and it was called The Footprint of a Woman. And so it was talking about these dynamic women and all that they've done. But, as I'm doing it over the years and gathering these interviews, it just really struck me, I'm not sure I'm the right one to be telling their stories. And I just thought, really, each one of them needs to be telling their stories and needs to be sharing it with their children. And the children need to be asking. And the other thing, too, is I truly believe when we get old, we should feel loved, connected, and know that our lives mattered. And too often that doesn't happen. And especially for women, the older women, they just don't see a lot of what they've done as all that important. And I find that extremely sad. And the other part is that there's often a rift between adult children and their moms. As they age, that there's not that connection, there's not that closeness, and so this, I felt, was a way also to try and, grow that relationship back together, to mend, heal it, and to help adult children understand their mom from a whole different perspective. Right. So, yeah, so it's kind of some big goals with it, but.
Well, those are, of course, there should be big goals with it. Show me the book cover. Yeah,
I just love it. I just absolutely love it.
You know your mom's story, 365 questions you need to ask her.
Yes.
Yay.
Yeah, I absolutely love the woman who did this. I think did such a brilliant job. I just absolutely love it.
And how did you come up with the 365 questions?
Well, let's just say there's a whole lot more than that in there, but it was really just, it just struck me one day, man, we could ask a question a day for a year and still never, and then it was like, oh wow, 365 questions. There's a great title, right?
Right.
But yeah, we could ask a question a day for probably the rest of 20, 30, 40 years, rest of our lives, and still never get to, the heart of.
So how did you figure out which ones were important? Did you go back to your own questions that you couldn't answer about your own mom?
Some, I mean, some were sort of, just the generic kind of ones, but then it was like, really just to get the conversation started. Because actually, since I've printed it, oh my God, I probably have another 1,000 questions that could have gone in there. It's like, oh man, but there was a point. It was like, okay, you've got to stop. So it was about asking some of those ones that you would normally ask, but then it's about asking some of those ones that people don't think of. And I've heard of that lots. Like, oh my God, I never would have thought of asking my mom, a question like that.
So give me an example. Flip it open and give me an example of one of those questions. Because you're actually now you're on tour. It's a fun kind of tour, but I imagine some of these questions are coming up, right?
Yeah, some neat stuff. I think as you're talking about tour, yes, I'm going around doing some talks at some seniors residences, really just trying to help the women understand that their lives from a different perspective, that their lives mattered and that they've done. I mean, when you look at our moms, the women's the 80s, 90s, 100s, they've lived through the most dynamic change of anyone in history. Anyone. I mean, we're talking going from horseback riding and bike to we're shooting people to the moon and living out in space, right? Like, so dramatic, the change. So yeah, it's truly amazing. So the one thing with this book, I've divided it. I start out with talking about mom and how to really relate to her and why it's important to get her story. And to understand that to really have conversations with her, because here's one of the funny things I hear, and this happened at the talk last week. The women said to me, the older women, they're saying, thanks a lot for your talk. We thoroughly enjoyed it. And I says, that's great. I says, are you sharing your story with your children? And both of these women both kind of looked at each other, went, no. And I says, how come? They said, they've never asked. Now I hear the flip side of that from adult children, our age. And I say, so, are you having that talk with them? Yeah, I ask her all the time. And she always says, I don't know. And doesn't share her story, right?
Right.
So there's a disconnect on how to ask those questions and when to ask them. And so one of the things that I talk about in the book is about going back in time and understanding that the time she's most connected to is when she was a child. So if you can understand that era and talk about things from that era and compare it to now and do that kind of stuff, you're going to get a whole lot more from her. But it's also about us sharing our stuff too, right? And we don't. It's like, and I don't mean having to go into the deep, dark secrets kind of thing, but, just simply, I talked about cell phones, and they got such a kick out of it, from the old phones to the new phones. And we talked about the party lines and the big old phones, we talked about all of that stuff. And they just had such a who with it. Lots of different stuff came up. Like, it brought up a lot of stuff. I talked about apple pies and how to make them today versus way back when. And oh my God, the stories that came up were priceless. Actually, the funniest one was this guy came up to me after, and he said, back in, I think it was the 50s, maybe it might've been the late 40s. He said, there was about a dozen of us. And he said, we cleaned this orchard of apples and we decided we were making apple pies. He said, we made 84 in one day.
84.
I can't imagine doing that today we have modern technology. It makes it way easier.
Right.
He said, we got a little bit sick of apple pie. He says, but it was good. So anyway, I talk about that. And then I go into different sections that to do with marriage, travel, money, a lot of different things. So you asked about a question.
I'm just thinking, I was talking to my mom yesterday, and in fact, totally oversharing here, but I just had, after a decade, I've just had an IUD removed because I'm 52, and the doctor said the odds of you getting pregnant are slim to none, and slim left the building. So, okay, let's get this thing out. Well, guess what? I've started menstruating again, and I called my mom. I'm like, Mom, how old were you, and what have you given me genetically that I'm 52 and this is still going on? And she told me a story, which of course she had never told me before, about she had virtually the same conversation when she was 53 with her doctor, and her doctor was like, why do you still have that thing in? You're never going to get pregnant. And she was like, I better not get pregnant, otherwise you're taking care of it. And that's what I said too. I'm giving that thing, first one to touch it keeps it. So anyway, so we had a great conversation yesterday. We never have talked about that kind of thing. So anyway,
but thank you for that, because that is it. It's about just taking, and it doesn't have to be quite that personal, but that's cool, because that's what, honest to God, your mom will relate to. And so
you
much
didn't talk about those things, right? Like, you did not talk about your period, menstruation and stuff like those were subjects that, she wouldn't have even been talking to my dad about.
No. And see, and that's the thing to understand too, is our moms grew up in a time that sharing was not okay. Emotions were not okay. Saying I love you was not okay. Like, there's just, so many things that we really want and need as those adult kids, but she never learned how to do that. And so we have to understand that and respect that and teach her, so many of them are so open to wanting to talk. They just don't know how.
Yeah.
Just don't know how. Right.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Huh. Well,
it's,
okay.
it's,
So now you found a question.
yeah, I'm sort of flipping through and going, let me see. Yeah, I don't know which topic. What were some things she and her best friend used to do to talk about? And I've talked about her best friend, and I've gone through sort of the ages, different ages, because friends change over time, right?
Yeah.
Are any of her friends still alive? That's an awful question, but it's true. And I remember asking my mom that question, and it was cool because, I'm not sure why we got on that topic, but it was cool because she started going back and she started thinking about some of the people. And again, the one thing that I always say is try not to just ask a general question like, who is your best friend? Try and give some sort of context. When you went to school, who was the first kid you met at school, on your very first day kind of thing, so that she has some sort of context. Because, if I said to you, who is your best friend?
Right. It's too broad. Yes. When?
Well, now it's, so it's giving some context as well when you're asking the questions, right? So, and did she ever travel? Where did she travel to? What's some of the weirdest food she's ever eaten, on her travels?
Right.
Yeah. And what are the different ways that she traveled? Because again, our moms, they walked, they biked, they rode horses, they did.
Some of them would have been allowed to drive, and others, I imagine, didn't drive, right? My mom had cars, but she never got to choose her own car. That's one of the bugaboos that she had.
Isn't that fascinating?
Yeah. I learned that after my dad died, that she was like, I never got to choose my own car.
Oh, wow. Yeah, and I think that's pretty common too, right? And who taught her to drive, right? How did she learn?
Yeah, I don't know who taught her to drive.
And where did she get her license? This one woman, actually two women I talked with. This one woman, she was 16, and she has never done a driver's test in her life. She gave up her license finally at 87 and never did a driver's, because when she was 16, you used to walk in, pay, and go, here you go, here's your license, go drive.
Right.
So she got her license. Another lady that I knew, she couldn't read or write, and she had her license till she was 87. So, makes it interesting. I'm thinking.
Yeah.
I'm thinking reading's a little important when you're driving. But anyway, hopefully you learn
recognizing signs,
signs and know where you're going or need to go. Anyway, so some fascinating conversations to have. But and I just, like I said, I just find it sad that so much with our seniors, we just let the stories go, and they absolutely love that. Honest to God, you want to see a senior come to life, start talking about what they know, and wow.
Right. Yeah. So would you recommend for someone, let's say, okay, so there are some folks, friends of mine, for instance, who are childless, so they're not going to have that person asking them the questions, but their story and their experience is still, and my aunt, although she's passed, she never had kids, those stories are still important. So could someone take your book, or even me, and start to look at that and think, I can use this as a springboard to start to think about my own memoir?
Absolutely. And I really did write this for, to help elderly moms share their story and to create more of a connection with the kids, and to make sure that information is not lost. But anybody really can pick it up and use it. I know one lady's using it with her elderly father, and I've got orders already for doing one for dad. So
good.
My list to do.
Good.
Actually, always has been, but it's like, anyway. But I know several women my age who bought it for their kids. I know another woman who got it. Her kids are still, I think they're 11 and 14, and she's doing it with her kids, and she's doing it with her mom. So she's kind of doing it all together as kind of a group thing. And I thought, I love that idea. I think that's just fabulous. Yeah. So some really, seriously, I think, like I said, every woman should be sharing their story. Everybody should be, but I'm just very passionate about women because we just haven't. We just don't, and so much we know, learn is lost. And I think that within sharing our stories, that's where other people really get to know who we are.
Well, and as you said at the very beginning, we start to remember that the value that we do bring, because I know, well, I mean, from the work that I do, and I was facilitating a workshop 2 weekends ago.
Congrats on that, by the way.
And thank you. And it was one of the questions I asked them. So this was a workshop for writers specifically who are stuck. And one of the first questions I asked was for them to do is to take 3 minutes and to write down all of their accomplishments that they have achieved with writing. And in the room, there were 14 women and 1 man. And the majority of them went, I don't have any. And I said, 3 minutes, just start writing. Well, I couldn't stop them from talking. Because once they started to think about these things, they realized, well, I've had letters to the editor published, and I've had, all manner of I won a contest. I've done all of these different things. And we seem to forget all that we've accomplished in the mess of all of the rest that goes on. So I think it's so important to have us.
Yeah. And too often we compare, right? And that's one of the things with these women, I really talked about, going back in time, and I talked about the famous 5 in Canada, because there's 5 women who are really recognized for helping to women to get the right to vote, right? Back in 1929. And I said, but those women's names are the ones that people know. But I said, it didn't happen just because of them. I said, if there weren't tons of women and tons of men behind it, it never would have changed.
Right.
And I said, so, you just need to understand that we shouldn't be comparing to other people, and really just looking at all you have done. And yeah, so anyway, I absolutely love talking with the seniors, and yeah, doing this is just, I find incredibly inspiring. So hopefully it's having that effect on them as well, but it definitely is on me.
Yeah. Oh, that's great. That's so great. And how much fun that is too. That's the neatest book tour that I've ever heard of. That's really neat.
Yeah, it's been, like I said, it's been fun. I just, so I've got about another 5 or 6 booked. So, and hoping to do some more, but it's kind of like, hey.
So tell me the how you jumped from writing fiction, because how many novels do you have published?
I have 5 fiction and I have 2 nonfiction. And then actually I have another one that is a compilation of a bunch of people. But I still haven't seen it yet. So sort of 8, I guess. 7 that are mine, and then 1 that I have a part in. So
the anthology.
No, it's a different one that I'm still waiting to see. But anyway, it should be coming soon.
Neat. So how did you make that jump from fiction to nonfiction?
I've been writing actually nonfiction for a long time, but it's just been notes. Like I have notes and notes and notes. But it just last summer, my sisters and I were at a conference, and we spent the whole weekend standing in line up for a women's bathroom. And so because of that, and both of them are incredible writers, but don't do anything with it, right? And so I really pushed them and said, look, we got to write a book about this, because we laughed so hard about that being such a woman's thing, having to stand in line for women's bathrooms. So I managed to get them to write a book with me. So we published a book last fall, but this mother's story, it's kind of been on my plate for a while, it's just one of those things. And I thought I really need to, and I had started doing it last fall, and I was thinking, it'd be cool to launch it Mother's Day. But, saying that and putting the timeline together doesn't always jive, because it was January and I'm like, okay, so May, and then it's like, oh my God, May is only so many months away. And you got so many things to do, because after I write it, I send it out and I get it to where I think it's quite good. Then I send it to my beta team and say, okay, I need you to read this, critique it. So I've got to give them time, right? And then get it back, then get it to edit, edited, and then get it back, and then, get everything else done. And so it was kind of like, oh my God, I need to get moving on this.
But I don't even know, when is Mother's Day? Is it next weekend?
Yes, 13th.
So congratulations, you even beat that then.
Yes. It was honestly one of those things, so many, let's just say a number of things didn't fall into place like I had hoped, but it all worked out. So it's yeah. So, and actually it's really cool because on the 13th I am doing actually a book signing
Yay!
at a local really cool store. So yeah, I'm really excited.
That's fabulous. That's one of the things that, in fact, the workshop that I was facilitating was all around setting a milestone that you feel compelled to hold yourself accountable to. And that's a perfect example of that book to be released for Mother's Day or by Mother's Day.
Yes.
Gives you that, keeps you in the chair, right?
Yeah. Because it is important to, I mean, I used to, exactly what you're saying. I used to just write and think, oh, well, I can't do anything with it. It's, it's not that good. It's, back to what we're talking about, women thinking their stories aren't all that important. What I used to write, didn't think was all that important. But it is. I truly think everybody's a writer, and what they choose to do or not do with it. I think everybody should be publishing, but that's just a.
And you run an organization called Women's Rights Movement on Vancouver Island.
Yeah. So basically, it's really online, but it's really just helping women find their voice through writing. Again, I think writing is incredible. And it gets us in touch with so many things, and understand so many things, and it's a way to escape. And so I just love encouraging women to write. And so actually doing this book was also another way I thought to get people writing, even if they don't want to do stories or put something out there. It's a way of getting people writing.
Well, and sharing those stories, even if we just share them with within our own circles, it is so empowering.
Big time. And it's just such a gift to yourself, really, because I think writing itself just opens up our mind to so much and allows so much more to flow and understanding. And I just think it has incredible benefits.
I've been struggling, that is the word, with a memoir, which may not be a memoir in the end. It may be something entirely different, but the stories have been sitting with me, for many of them, for over a decade. And so I started writing them down, and then I was talking to my mom, and in having written them down, I was clarifying my memory of these experiences. For instance, the fact that I put myself through university. I paid for and worked and put myself through university, which is a fact. So I didn't screw that part up. But the part that I had written and was relaying to my mom was around, so I have a younger brother and a younger sister, and my dad paid for my sister all the way through to the end of her master's degree. And she's 2 years younger than me. And I worked all the way through university, and I got my BA a semester after my sister got her master's because I could only go to school part-time. And I remembered that my dad cut me off because he didn't like my punk rock lifestyle. And my mother just kind of looked at me, and this was when I was actually home after, or around the time when my dad was either sick or just after he passed away. She kind of looked at me, she's like, he didn't cut you off, you cut him off. And she said, he was willing to pay, but he had rules around, how you would use your money, and you weren't willing to live by his rules. And so you actually cut him off of supporting you. I was like, oh, okay. And it's like, in writing it down, and now I've got this whole new context and way of thinking about that whole period of 8 years and my relationship with my dad and the power that I had where I thought I was disempowered. So it's really interesting.
Thank you for bringing that up, because that's actually one of the things that I hope happens as well with kids going through this, is to understand things differently, because the way that we often take things as a kid and the way they were intended and just understanding the times, very, very different. And plus there's a point that we just need to forgive and let that go. And so I'm hoping, but it does, like you saw a whole different way of, oh, wow.
It changed everything. Well, I mean, it didn't change everything, but suddenly it changes things. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Anyway, so now my sister, my middle, the middle, she can't claim to be the favorite anymore because I didn't get cut off. So, sibling rivalry is reignited, which is always fun.
That's cool. Yes.
Anyway, I'm gonna cut this off here, and So where can people find you, Glenna?
You can go to glennamageau.com, and so GLENNAMAGEAU.com. The book, if they're on Vancouver Island, they can buy it at a number of different places. I have them on my website, who's selling my book.
Yeah.
But it's available on Amazon, Barnes and Noble, all of the online bookstores to buy. So right now the paperback is just through Amazon, but I am looking at having expanded distribution so it can go to bookstores and libraries and all of that anywhere. So yeah.
Okay. Well, thank you. And thanks. I mean, I love that a cup of tea catch up has turned into something that I think is going to be really interesting and important for a whole bunch of other people who didn't join us or who might have just joined us for a cup of tea. Anyway.
Love it.
All right. Thanks, Glenna.
Yeah.
Okay. Bye.
Bye.
Are you a member of the Creative Academy yet? Join us today and unlock a wealth of resources, masterclasses, feedback opportunities, and community events designed to help you reach the next step in your writing journey. No matter what stage you're at, we've got a helping hand to guide you along the way. Check out our free resource room if you'd like to get a taste of how we can help you reach your writing and publishing goals. Thank you for bringing us along on your writing and publishing journey. Crystal, Eileen, and I hope to see you around the Creative Academy soon.